Hello, everybody. Welcome back to feature story writing. So this is part two to the videos. The first part was we worked on learning how to write a lead for a particular prompt. And oops, getting a ding there, hitting the right button. So today we're going to talk about writing the middle and end of the story once you've mastered that lead writing. We're going to use the same prompt that we used with the lead writing, and it has been posted on the website, so you can download it and review it if you want. It's a prompt about a junior named Clara Brown who has aplastic anemia, and she needs a bone marrow transplant. And that's what the story is about. So let's look briefly at the lead that I wrote for this. The lead is 16-year-old Clara Brown has her own guardian angels, her twin 5-year-old sisters. One angel is giving Clara, who suffers from aplastic anemia, her bow and arrow. The other angel is giving her hair. My bow and arrow will make Clara better, Ellie said, and that's all these angels want, a healthy big sister. So that's the lead we wrote for that story. And it's a pretty decent lead. It's got lots of details in it. It's got a nice quote embedded in it. It's got a fragment, a healthy big sister, but it works to kind of add that punch to the lead. We got to follow the lead with a nut graph that links the lead into the nut graph, that links the two together. And we use the word bow and arrow we brought bow and arrow from the lead into the nut graph to make that a smooth transition. The bow and arrow, or bone marrow as the doctors call it, is Clara's one shot at regaining her health. This fall, Clara, a junior, was diagnosed with a severe form of anemia. The only possible cure for the disease is a bone marrow transplant, which she will receive on April 26th after enduring 4 weeks of chemotherapy to kill off her own bone marrow. So basically, this nut graph is telling the reader what the story is going to be about. It's about this student at your school who's got this severe form of anemia. She's got to have a bone marrow transplant. And we even give the readers the date of when that will happen. So from this nut graph, we've got to write the rest of our story. I lost my arrow there. There we go. And so just like in news writing, we're going to use the transition quote formula, but our formula looks a little bit different for feature writing. That first box up there is the lead, which we've written, and a lead can be, in a feature story, can be 1 paragraph, could be 5 paragraphs. It just depends on the type of lead that you write and what you include in your lead. Some leads are only 2 words, just kind of depends on what angle you take. But we've done that, and then we followed it with our nut graph. In following our nut graph, we want to get a direct quote really high in the story. If we don't have one in the lead, we want to make sure that we've got one right after the nut graph. Now, we do have a very short direct quote in our lead, but we still want to keep that following the nut graph a direct quote. And then we're going to go sit right into our transition direct quote, transition and direct quote formula. And remember, our transition can be a fact, it can be an indirect quote, and that's when we take what somebody else has said and we put in our words, or it can be a partial quote when we just put quotation marks around, maybe they say something really emphatic, and then the rest is our words. But we want that transition to lead into the direct quote, and then we want the next transition to lead into the next direct quote. And we just follow this formula all the way until the story is finished. So let's look and see what I chose. I like this like we're all writing together. We're not, because we're all in little rooms all by ourselves because we're in a pandemic. So I'll go. So sorry, I digress. I've been alone way too long. Okay, so this is our nut graph, the bow and arrow, or bone marrow, as the doctors call it, is Clara's one shot at regaining her health. Whoops, ooh, went too fast. This fall, Clara was diagnosed with a severe form of anemia. The illness she will receive, or skipping along, on April 26th after enduring 4 weeks of chemotherapy to kill off her own marrow. When the doctors told us what I had, we were silent, she said. We'd never heard of the disease, but we knew what anemia was and didn't think it was that big of a deal. So this quote links up to the nut graph because it's explaining when she got the diagnosis, and it's talking about the anemia, and they didn't think it was a big deal at first. So this was the first direct quote that I used. So following that, I'm going to go into my first transition. And my first transition and quote package, I like to call it a package because they should be linked. They should work together. So the first transition of the story, then the doctors dropped the bomb. Clara's anemia was the most severe form and would probably kill her without a bone marrow transplant. I was stunned, she said. My parents peppered the doctor with questions, but I couldn't say anything. I'm 16 years old. I can't imagine dying. Really powerful quote. A lot of emotion in that quote. So where did we get that transition? So a transition is going to come from two different places. It's either going to come from the situation description at the very beginning of the story, or it's going to come from a direct quote. And then we have to take that and turn it into our own words. So for that transition, we got it right in here. We got it in within the direct quotes, okay? The doctors dropped the bomb. I had the most severe type, and it would likely take my life if I couldn't find a bone marrow transplant. So it came directly from the quotes. And what we did is I like this what I did is I put it in my words. I still use some of the words that were on the sheet. Then the doctors dropped the bomb, but I condensed it some. Ooh, whoops. Claire's anemia was the most severe form and would probably kill her without a bone marrow transplant. So it's not word for word what they said, and it's very factual, so I didn't attribute it. You're a little bit looser with your attributions in a feature story than you are in a news story, and this is very factual. So we could have said, she said at the end of that transition, but it's not really necessary for this one. So that's where that transition came from. So the next transition and quote package to follow that reads, her parents immediately put together a list of potential bone marrow matches for Clara. First, Claire's parents and 2 aunts were tested, no match. Then the national bone marrow list, again, no match. Each time we got another no, my mom cried, Clara said. I tried to be strong, but it was hard watching how devastated she was with each phone call. So what I want you to note again is the power in this quote. The quotes I'm choosing to use as the direct quotes in my story are the ones that have all of that emotion in it. So this transition also came from a direct quote. It came from right down here in this direct quote. Family members are often a match, so my mom's parents and 2 aunts were tested, no matches. Then the doctors looked on the national marrow list, and again, no match. So again, we're pulling that transition from the direct quote. This right here, this transition came from the direct quote of Clara. Again, it's very factual based, so we didn't put an attribution. You could, but you don't have to on this one because it's very factual based. It's not a lot of opinion going on here. So following that, the story continues with more transitions and quotes. Finally, it came down to the twins. Clara didn't want Ellie and Eve tested, but Clara's condition was deteriorating. She was going to the hospital almost daily for blood checks and weekly for platelet and red blood cell transfusions. Now notice in that transition, there's a lot of information and a lot of detail. That's what we want in those feature stories, is we want those details. We want that specifics of what's going on so the reader can really connect to the story. And then we want the quotes to really dive in to the emotion of it. So that transition's got a lot of facts in it, a lot of details. And then listen to this quote. It's got the emotion. When we told the twins that Ellie was a perfect match, Eve cried, Clara said. She wanted to give me something. She wanted to make me better too. Next transition. That's when Mrs. Brown suggested that Eve give Clara her hair for a wig. Eve immediately got out the scissors. Eve had beautiful long curly hair, Clara said. I was always envious of that hair. The doctors told Clara that after 2 doses of chemotherapy, her hair would begin to fall out, but Clara is not going to wait that long. After the first dose, I'm going to shave my head and show off my beautiful blonde wig, Clara said. So again, we have our transitions flowing into our direct quotes. So Mrs. Brown suggested that Eve give Clara her hair for a wig. We have a quote about that. And again, it's got some emotion tied to it. And then we have Clara talking about how she's going to, that when her hair is going to fall out. And then the quote that talks about how she's going to shave her head. So then we're going to wrap up our story. On March 28th, Clara will undergo her first round of chemotherapy. Clara will remain homebound to protect her recovering immune system for the rest of the school year. With a little luck and a few prayers, I may be able to return for my senior year, Clara said. That's my goal, a normal, uneventful, healthy senior year. Clara's mom, Ginger Brown, said she's proud of her girls, all 3. What brave little girls they are, she said. Ellie doesn't quite understand what will happen, but she knows her sister will get better, and that's all that matters. And that powerful quote, Ellie doesn't quite understand what will happen, but she knows her sister will get better, and that's all that matters. That is a nice way to end that story. It's a nice, powerful quote. Is this story perfect? No, but it's got a lot of good flow. We want to make sure that our transitions flow into our direct quotes, and that really happened with these transitions. So what I want you to really note, a couple things to notice is that it was more than just Clara that was quoted in the story. We have her sister quoted, and we also have her mom quoted. The story almost goes in a chronological order so that we can understand it. And that's a good way to do a feature story. If there's a way for you to do it in chronological order that kind of helps your reader understand, that's an easy, good way to write a feature story. Now, it doesn't always work, but this one, it worked. For this prompt, it worked. We want those transitions flowing into those quotes. And I want you to note that most of the time, our quotes were more than one sentence, and often our transitions were more than one sentence. And again, that's okay, because we're filling the reader in on all those specifics and all of those details. The quotes, we really want to show the emotion of the story, and we want the transitions to give those specifics and the details and to lead the reader along the path of the story. Also note that we use Clara on second reference because this is a story about a student, and when y'all talk about each other, you use first names, so that's acceptable. Now, if the story was about a teacher who had aplastic anemia, then we wouldn't use her first name on second reference. We would use their last name on second reference. But if it's about a student, you can do that for the UIL contest. And notice that we saved a powerful quote for the end of the story, because we want to end the story with power in a feature story. In a news story, we just go from most important to least important. But for a feature story, it's got a beginning, middle, and end, and we want the end to be powerful just like the beginning. And then along the way with our transitions, we did use some transitional words to kind of help with story flow. We used the word finally, we used the word then. It was in two different transitions. Let me see if I can go back in here. Right here, this transition at the very beginning, finally it came down to the twins. That kind of helps the reader and helps the story flow. So you can use those transitional words. If you don't know what they are, all you have to do is Google transitional words and it'll all come up and it'll make it easy for you. But that's just kind of how we put one story together. So now I challenge you to get a UIL prompt, get a feature writing prompt, read through it, see what sticks, write your lead, your nut graph, and then get in and write the meat of the story. Do those transitions in those powerful quotes. And keep practicing, guys. The more you do it, the better you're going to get. And the better your chances are to moving from placing 1, 2, and 3 in district, and then moving to regionals, and then finally come to see me at state. I want to see all of you at the state meet this year. At the very bottom, I finally remembered to put my email, so there it is. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'd love to hear from you. I hope you all have a fantastic day, evening, whatever time you read this. I'm going to stop the video. Oh, goodness gracious. Let's see here. I think I'm going to have to go back here. And it's not letting me stop the video. Stop share, and there we go.